Thank you very much for your patience. We're running a little behind schedule. We're getting there. This is about the CREATE project, which is an initiative to create a copyright education for arts-focused high schools and perhaps other audiences. And I'd like to introduce Andrew and Rebecca, who have been working on this project. They are the rising 2Ls in the BLIP clinic. They're going to be continuing to work on it throughout the summer and throughout next year, and they're going to show you exactly what we've been up to and hopefully solicit your feedback, and we'd love to get you guys involved moving forward. And that's it. I'll turn it over to them.
Thank you very much, Sean. Thank you guys for staying here. We really appreciate you guys coming out today and staying throughout. I hope after our presentation we can solicit some feedback from you guys, and then we can get you to come upstairs and to drink a beer with us. So I'm going to start the presentation by taking you guys back about 50 years. Now, 50 years ago, the line between the artist and the consumer was very clearly delineated. On one side of the equation, we had the artist, who was the producer. He was the one that made the movies, the TV, the music. And on the other side of the equation, we had the consumer. Now, the consumer didn't have any say in what was produced. He just simply consumed it. This culture is what we would consider to be a read-only culture, where the consumer just takes what he is given and gives nothing back. Now, if we go ahead and fast forward the equation about 50 years, we'll see that the landscape has changed very dramatically, and that no longer is it a very clear distinction between the consumer and the artist, but instead, we just have us. We're all artists. We can all create. Right, Nina? You and I can go online, we can produce, we can put up media, we can speak to the world. And this is what we would call a read and write culture, where I can consume what you produce, but I can also voice my creative feelings, my artistic abilities. Now, one would wonder, why did this occur? And there's a pretty plain reason. It's the democratization of technology. The fact that any one of us now can go out and we can buy a $1,000 camera, and we can produce something that comes pretty close to Hollywood quality. Now, while anyone in here can capture, mix, and distribute very easily, there's one group that's doing this at an incredibly quick rate. That group that's making art is the children. Now, everyone can be an artist, but it's inherent for children because they've grown up in this culture. These children, all the time, they know that they need to capture, mix, and distribute. And they have these tools available to them and have had since they were born. But there's a problem. And the problem is that when these children are capturing and mixing, one of the other things that they're doing is that they're remixing. They're taking pieces of existing culture and they're building upon them. Now, this is a pretty good thing, but the problem is that when they remix, they distribute, they don't know the law when it comes to copyright. So they're forced to make a choice. Two paths. If they stay to the copyright, they don't use anybody else's previous work, they don't take influence from others, they're okay. But there would be some that would believe that this isn't a good thing. That if you don't build upon prior art, you won't establish a new, rich public domain. In fact, there are a lot of respected thinkers who over time have said that prior art is what we build upon. That in order to accomplish, we need to use the work of others. So we have this path. We can stay to the right, play it safe. Or we can go to the left. We can borrow from others. We can use ideas. We can mix. We can try to create all sorts of new culture. But as some in this room may know, sometimes that doesn't go so well. So what do we do for the children? Well, we're here today to tell you that even though you have this path, with education, you don't have to make a choice. With education, we can teach today's youth, today's digital natives, how to navigate the copyright law and how to create while staying within the bounds of the law. Let's find out a little more.
So the current state of copyright education, there are 3 problems. It's partisan, it's difficult to implement, and the need is new, so the resources really aren't there yet. So when we say it's partisan, we're talking about a really great educational program. The Copyright Alliance has done a great job promulgating materials, but they left out fair use, which we think is pretty important. Another example, difficult to implement. The EFF has a great copyright website online full of lesson plans. You should all check it out. But it's static right now. No one's investing in the project. No one's updating these lesson plans. And finally, the need is new. It's only recently that these tools have become so simple that 13-year-old kids can create their own movies and do a wonderful job at it and distribute it on YouTube for tons of people to see. Enter CREATE. Creative rights empowerment achieved through education. So our mission, our ultimate goal is to empower the next generation by providing them with a proper understanding of their creative rights. This means teaching them the full scope of copyright law through an accurate, neutral, professor-approved curriculum. With a solid understanding of how intellectual property works in the 21st century, students of today can be confident in the creativity they will produce for tomorrow. Now we're doing this all with the Common Core standards in mind. In the summer of 2010, New York State, as well as most of the states in the United States, adopted the Common Core State Standards curriculum. Our lesson plans were designed with these achievements in mind. That way, what we achieve in New York, in our home state, can be spread throughout the country. And our lesson plans won't just work here, they'll work within curriculum guidelines all across the U.S.
So how did we design this curriculum? Our curriculum features 5 modules. We got into a room, we gave a lot of thought to what has been done in the past with copyright education, and we thought about the best way to teach children copyright with an emphasis on the idea of exercising their creative rights, showing students how they were going to both be able to monetize their creation, but also stay within the legal bounds of using others' work. Our first module touches on the idea of what is intellectual property. Now this is a very amorphous concept. Even for law students, they have difficulty sometimes understanding the difference between physical goods and the idea of a non-rivalrous product such as intellectual property. Something as simple as the idea that I have a music file and I make a copy for you, now we both have it, and whether or not that's fair is a pretty complex topic for a high school student, which is why we've developed an entire module to teach this concept. The second touches upon copyright basics, including concepts like ownership, duration, what is copyright overall. Early on in the modules here, what we're doing is we're laying the groundwork, teaching really the fundamental tenets of copyright, so that later on we can practice with these students applying these concepts to their work and their daily life. The third topic is fair use, something I think that's very important to artists and students alike. And we're going to touch upon in fair use, breaking it down and talking about the 4 fair use factors so that students do have an idea of what goes into a fair use analysis. But the main goal with the fair use module is to show students what is definitely fair use and is all right for them to do, what is not fair use and falls into the piracy realm and shouldn't be done, and what falls somewhere in the middle where they should gain extra guidance. The 4th module touches upon the Creative Commons and other permissive licensing schemes. We want to show students how they have the ability to both give others the right to use their creativity in order to build on that and enrich the public domain while still monetizing the work that they have done. And finally, really a module that's going to talk about the application of what we've done before, talking about social media, the digital millennium copyright, and how this applies to what students are doing on a regular basis. Now, each of the materials, as we can see, these aren't quite finalized yet. I might run into some copyright problems if I had put these out. But each of the materials, this is kind of an exemplary show, that we will have both a teacher's guide and a lesson plan. And the guide, as we'll show you in a second, the goal really here is to give teachers, while we as law students and the creators of this curriculum plan to be the ones testing it out, the ultimate goal is to be able to go into a classroom, to take a high school teacher and say, here's the lesson plan, here's the teacher's guide. The teacher's guide should provide you with all the background information necessary to teach the step-by-step instruction that's in the lesson plan. Go teach it, and we're here if you need help. Now this shows a little bit of one of our teacher's guides over here. As it says at the top here, if you can see, it says essentially that this teacher's guide provides all the background necessary. You don't need to have any other grounding in copyright education to be able to teach this. The teacher's guide that we will have will show everything that you need. Further, we make ourselves available over here. It says that if you have questions about copyright, we make ourselves available to answer any of those questions, whether it's about the lesson plan, how to implement it, or copyright itself. One of the ongoing goals of this project is to have us, as the Create developers, be an ongoing resource to any teacher that may implement this curriculum. One of the goals we want to make sure that we convey in this presentation today is that some people worry that we're here to advocate, whether it be copyleft or copyright biases. And the fact of the matter is that we're not here to advocate. That instead, the goal of Create is that we want to educate so that we can enable others to innovate. This is about students. This is about teaching students what they can do within the bounds of law.
So you may be wondering, how are we planning to do this? So the plan is, first, BLIP students all semester have been working on drafts of lesson plan and teacher's guide. They're close, they're not quite done, but we have an idea of what we want to teach in each lesson plan. We will work next with copyright professors and the copyright community to rewrite these lesson plans to make sure they're accurate and they're neutral, and that they have all the information they need to include. Next, we're going to engage the education community and make sure our lesson plans are age-appropriate and engaging. We're going to talk to educators, principals, teachers, make sure this is going to engage a class for an hour. Then we're going to test the lesson plan. This is the fun part for us. In New York City high schools, see how kids react to them, get feedback, and work on them again. And then we're going to rinse and repeat. At each stage, we plan to solicit feedback and rework our curricula until we have a proof of concept. We want to have the best and strongest plans we possibly can. We then plan to share our guides online and focus our efforts on raising awareness in the community, letting people know we're out here as a resource. The BLIP Clinic will remain a resource, will be available for teachers and students to ask us questions and to give us feedback if they think things have changed and we're not accurately presenting it anymore. But the ultimate goal is to enable educators to take control. We want them to be able to do this without a BLIP clinician in the classroom, allowing our project to have a wider reach than we possibly could going into just classrooms in New York City. So finally, we need your help. Our email address is at the bottom, create.blipclinic.org, and we're looking for a couple things. We're looking for your feedback, for your ideas, what you think this project should include. We're also looking to network. Do you know an educator, a principal, someone who's involved in copyright law who can give us valuable information and feedback on these lesson plans as we work on them?
So this is a project that recently was awarded with fellowship from the New York Bar Foundation, is it?
Bar Association.
The Bar Association. So this is going to be something that BLIP clinicians are going to be working on all summer. So it's something that we definitely want to hear from you guys on. So I believe Nadine handed out our business cards. Please do talk to us after here. We're going to go up and grab a beer. Talk to us about the project. Send us emails in terms of anybody that you could put us in touch with. We'd love to get together a network of people that are passionate about copyright education and the arts and things of that nature. And at some point in the next couple of weeks or months, we're going to be posting these lesson plans, these teachers' guides online, and we do want your feedback. So with that, John Randall, who is, again, this is John Randall's baby, this project. He has seen it through now, both when it started at the Berkman Center up at Harvard and when we brought it down to good old Brooklyn. So we'd love to hear feedback from you guys. Thank you for your time today. Great job, guys.
So yeah, I mean, I don't have a whole lot to add. If you guys know educators, we really need people who know what a lesson plan is supposed to be and who can help us really take what we've done and tailor it for classroom use. Because the classroom is a really particular environment. We don't have expertise as educators. Some of us have taught English in Japan, some of us have taught some college courses here and there. But we don't really know a lot about high school education and middle school education. And we also have a Google group. Is that up?
Will be, and
Google group will be up on the Create website, which is linked off the Legal Hackathon website in less than an hour. Join our Google group if you're into this, because we're going to have some meetups and we're going to try to pull together a community to really make this thing happen, and again, make it so that we can spread it to other schools as well. And until somebody kicks us out, like Phil, we'd love to talk about some questions, and like Phil lets us. Yeah. All right. Who's got questions? We don't have to raise hands. Let's just talk.
Okay. Do you have a specific age group in mind? Is it 13-year-olds? Is it younger or older?
We were, and initially, we thought a lot about this, and well, Middle school is where kids first start to learn about copyright. It used to be just plagiarism, but now, because piracy is such a big deal, I'm sorry, was I too sarcastic there? So now that kids are starting to learn about copyright in middle school, but we think that the low-hanging fruit is probably arts-focused high schools, because these are kids who really need to know the nuts and bolts in copyright to make their careers, and we want to give them that foundational knowledge. We'd love to have a curriculum for each age group eventually, but our first step is going to be arts-focused high schools.
Are you utilizing technology for these lesson plans?
We'd love to. Right now, the technology that we're using is exemplars that point to different videos on the web where there are some great resources out there. When this project was, I don't know if it's this project or a prior incarnation of a similar project at the Berkman Center, we had developed a couple of interactive flash tools, like a fair use tool, like where you go through and answer some interactive quizzes. We'd love to go there. Right now, we're not quite there yet, and we're not quite sure where this might be deployed. It might be deployed in classrooms that don't have access to technology. So the short answer is we'd love to. We're not quite there yet, but that's obviously such a media-rich topic. It would be silly to not have.
And you were just saying that, or he was saying that the kids know technology in the first place, so to see it in use rather than a traditional classroom setting could really bring it to life.
Yeah.
And at this point, we're still really thinking of what form are the lesson plans going to take. And there's clearly going to be a paper copy of kind of a step-by-step guide, but we think in terms of incorporating multimedia, it's just kind of an absolute must. One of the things Becca showed, the teaching copyright curriculum from the Electronic Frontier Foundation. And again, it's something that we've built upon using this project, but I think one of the reasons that it didn't really catch on and kind of trend, as we would say, is that there wasn't a ton of multimedia built in. So this is something that, again, there were a ton of resources out there that we hope to incorporate within this eventually.
We also have anecdotal feedback that the EFF isn't seen as neutral enough. So we'd love to bring these young kids to the edge of thinking about copyright issues and let them go explore the debate, but we're hesitant to put more than a toe in the water of the debate because then you get pushback from the education community. I'd like to be wrong about that, but anecdotally that's what we have.
One other question, have you guys thought about game format, sort of like how Zynga did their privacy bill?
We have. There's a lot of potential there, but that's like really, really resource intensive. So that's if interactive stuff is stage 2, games is stage 3.
And we would love anybody in the room that has contacts of people that are kind of passionate about education and can, coders, programmers, anybody that would be interested in helping us with this, eventually we'd love to network.
I want to hear what Nina has to say.
Yeah, well, I mean, this will probably come as no surprise. This doesn't seem neutral at all to me. I'm sure that what seems neutral to me will seem incredibly biased to other people, but even in the presentation you use the word what should and shouldn't be done. They should do this, they shouldn't do that. Piracy, this falls in the category of piracy, and of course we shouldn't do that. And I realize this is education, this is our education institution, which to me is like an indoctrination institution. If you have a module called intellectual property, that's bias right there.
Mm-hmm. Which is inherent in education.
Yeah,
it's inherent materials.
in education.
Is Wendy in here? Where's Wendy? Wendy Setzler calls it intellectual protections rather than intellectual property.
You know, intellectual monopoly, or
there you
something
go.
like that. You could, Anyway, not that my little lone voice makes any difference in this. We'll go rolling on without it, but I just wanted to say something about that. There's no way this can be neutral.
I think you're right, because we did a dry run of this in front of our clinic class on Wednesday, and the first comment we got back was, this seems too far left. So I think we have to recognize ourselves that people on either side are going to think we're too left or too right. But the best thing we can do is get as much feedback from both sides of the line and try to incorporate that.
But that said, I mean, to couch this really as, we're aspiring lawyers, and as lawyers, what you do is you advise your client, and then later on your client makes the decision. So I think what we're teaching to students here is what's going to get you in trouble. So in terms of the fair use analysis, what is very clearly on the right side in terms of what does case law say is very clearly on the right side of the law to the point where you are going to avoid any liability here, and what is very clearly on the other side, is one right or is one wrong? I think that is, again, where it comes in that we're not here to advocate. We're simply going to say, and it's very difficult not to editorialize, obviously, but we're simply going to say, this is what the law is, and we want to teach you this. Whether or not you want to be Kim.com or somebody on the other side there, you can make that a decision eventually, but you should have this knowledge of the law.
I mean, it's no secret that personally I'm in law school because of Lawrence Lessig, and he inspired me to really jump into this issue. And I have a lot of sympathy with the copyleft side of things. I'd like to think that if you give kids the tools and the vocabulary to really think about these issues, and if in our first lesson we talk about the fundamentals of intellectual property, and there's a tension, there's lots of tensions in intellectual property or protections or whatever you call it. And by giving kids the lay of the landscape, they can really take these issues on themselves, and they can go read something that Nina might have to write, or something that Cory Doctorow might have to write, or maybe somebody on the other side might have to write, and just have the tools to have a robust dialogue about this. If this was a voting issue in 15 years, I would be thrilled. But right now, most people aren't even talking about it, and kids in high schools, arts-focused high schools, still don't know about copyright and don't know how to stay out of trouble. So giving them tools that they can use in their careers, and if they want to take their careers to a place of advocacy, I would be tickled, but we have to be careful not to go so far that we then get pushback from the education community.
Right. I mean, I almost wish that that it would just continue being as biased as it is, because then what kids do is they get their real education outside of the education system, which is, you get a much higher quality education outside of it, especially because sooner or later, it's exciting times to live in right now because a lot of kids know that they're being lied to. And that's pretty cool. I mean, it may get better information elsewhere.
I actually have to disagree. I feel like a program like this could be completely neutral, because if you're presenting, facts or the way things are at this point, that's neutral in itself. So calling something intellectual property is referring to it as an accepted term. I mean, that's providing a fact. That's not providing, your opinion one way or the other. So, I think what you guys are doing could be neutral, completely neutral.
And I appreciate, we appreciate all of those comments, because I think this illustrates something that we have to be very careful with throughout, is making sure that kind of our editorializing, our opinions don't show through in this material, and that, as John mentioned, we do intro the debate, and we talk about the idea that some people may think that the concept of intellectual property is, lockup is intellectual protectionism, because maybe that gets them thinking and gets them learning more, but in terms of when we present things as facts, it needs to be the unadulterated facts, the law as it stands.
And my opinions are my own. They are not the opinions of creative rights empowerment achieved through education. For anybody who's recording,
I vote Republican.
And I'm as liberal as you could get. So here we are, the spectrum.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, so I, before law school, was a teacher in New York State, and so I know how difficult it is sometimes to actually get something on the curriculum that's not on the region.
Right.
It's like you go to your department head and you're like, hey, I want to cover this for a week, and they're like, that's awesome, because if they don't pass the regions, this entire school. So especially if I taught at a really bad high school, and our most famous graduate was actually Danger Mouse, who probably knew nothing about copyright. He mixed out together. But I'm wondering if you might, if you could make this stuff available. I know a lot of people at universities that actually make albums, because they have schools that house production studios and give them all of the tools to make the actual album, and then they go put the album out there and they know nothing about actually getting legal protection, copyright, any of that stuff. So if they could, maybe there's some sort of platform where they could have access, because I know a lot of them, they end up getting a pamphlet from Atlantic on how to protect stuff, and that's not really what they want either. So maybe if you looked into universities that actually house production programs and studios.
That's great, because that's teaching, figuring out how to abstract away detail and make it understandable to younger audiences is really tricky, because copyright law is really complicated. So by being able to leave some of the sophistication in with a college audience, that's an even easier bar. Maybe that's even lower hanging fruit.
Yeah. They're also usually looking for it. I know a lot of them are because I get random emails from people.
Yeah, we would love if you would forward us some of those names or contacts.
And join our Google group.
Yeah, there's no reason why we can't share what we've been working on so far, especially after it goes through this summer's revision. We'd love to make it accessible.
So you guys have been talking about arts-focused high schools, and you mentioned how, and maybe a non-arts-focused high school, it's going to be tough for teachers to incorporate this into their curriculums that they have to teach. So before law school, I was actually a youth media coordinator in an after-school program, but it was housed within the Cambridge Public Schools in Cambridge. And we had a really hard time teaching kids about how to use Creative Commons licensed works because we couldn't access Flickr, like there were filters up, and so we couldn't, we couldn't use those tools to teach kids like how they could actually do the right thing and use Creative Commons licensed work. So that's like one challenge we ran into. And then also just generally like teaching them fair use because there was so much pushback. Like we were doing a news program and we could have probably used copyrighted images under like the news commentary, part of fair use, but that was like not acceptable because there's still going to be a lot of pushback with like the administration. So just like a couple of challenges, I guess, to keep in mind.
I think those are all probably very real challenges. I'd like to think that on the other side, there are a certain class of teachers that teach the arts and are into the issue, or surprisingly the computer teachers, the people who run the computer labs, those communities, the teachers who use Twitter, are kind of in the other direction because they share your frustration. So maybe, in module, the very beginning of module 1 is like how to use Tor to get around your firewall or something like that. I mean, do you have any suggestions as to how we can overcome those challenges and try to push adoption that way?
I wonder if there could be some sort of like policy component of the project where you have people working with the high up people in the administration saying like we really need to like not apply filters to Flickr, or like we really need to like be more lax and like or like give special permissions to the kids who are working on these like arts projects, or I don't know, like maybe just thinking about like incorporating some kind of
attacking the firewall.
Yeah.
We could, when somebody else starts another project to attack the firewall problem, we would totally link them.
Yeah. So I'm just thinking, I know this is a nice acronym, I mean, it's creative, but I guess what would make it seem neutral to me is if it were just like copyright law curriculum. Instead of saying these are your rights, these are your creative rights empowerment. I mean, even calling this stuff rights is a biased thing. But if you're talking about the law, that is really important. I mean, it would be great if instead of going into it, just going like, this is the law, this is how the law works, this is the law. And you're not talking about any, you're just saying what the law is.
So the hope, and you might be right about the name. I mean, in terms of the bias, I don't know, that's a whole other conversation. But create does say something. And when we originally came up with it, the idea was, okay, you want to be creative, and there are these creative rights that protect rights holders. But we are also concerned about the creative rights of fair use and the creative rights of relying on the public domain. So the rights, the way that we lay it out, and that's obviously not hasn't been communicated yet, but the rights we see as on both sides. So it's not just your copyrights, it's also your creative rights to use other people's material out of the public domain or out of whatever. That is a right that you have.
Yeah, that's like a bias. See, that I have a problem with that whole framework. The idea of like these creative rights protect you, the creator. It's like, creators on one side. It's like the beginning of the thing was creators on one side and people on the other side. And it was already pointed out. No, we're all on the same side. There's no like protecting against.
Right.
There's a lot there. I mean, we should there's a lot there to talk about, and nothing is final. So.
But I would love it. I mean, like if you guys just called this like the copyright law curriculum, copyright law education or something, I'd be like, yeah, okay, cool. You're teaching
in our Creative Commons lesson, especially, we're also here are resources that you can use to go find Creative Commons material, and here are your best practices to keep the metadata with it so that you can properly provide attribution. So those kind of things is where we get to our creativity empowerment. Even if we were to stay away from the word rights, like we do really like the idea of empowering people with knowledge to go out there and be creative and not run into legal problems. Or empower people with legal knowledge to go comment on the state of affairs. But empowerment through knowledge in the arena of creativity is what we're getting at. I mean, I understand what you're saying about rights. I know that other people that are part of the team that are far more protectionist than I am that would argue with you. There's a lot there. We should think about it more. And please join our Google groups if we can.
How about, copyright education achieved through empowerment and still call it creative?
Just come up with that.
Yeah. Well done.
Best hack of the day, right?
Have you given thought
thought to...
Somebody writing it down, please.
Have you given thought to follow-up for classrooms once you've distributed the modules and how to like capture changes in behavior and attitudes?
So initially, we want to send law students to these high schools to go teach, and not just students from the clinic, but also hopefully students from IB clubs that may be interested. Maybe even some folks who are interested in pre-law undergrad programs to send them out. But eventually, in order for it to scale, we have to just be distributing materials online. But I totally think that there should be follow-up. We need educators to help us figure out how best to do that.
I think the stickiness of the material really is going to be determined. I mean, if we go in terms of looking at the curriculum itself, the first couple of modules really kind of lay the groundwork for copyright itself. So if we kind of look at this, when you do module 1 and 2 and even some of 3, some of the other modules really are going to determine how much of this has been sticky. How much have people heard this, have students heard this, and really retain that information. So that's really going to help us be able to say, okay, this is working, this is not working. If we get to module 5 and we're trying to apply something and the students don't remember, some issue of duration or ownership or just some basic copyright element, that's when we kind of have to say, okay, we need to figure out why this wasn't as sticky, why this wasn't as effective. Other questions, comments?
Did you say copyright education achieved through empowerment?
That's what I said. I don't know.
That's good.
Yeah.
I know, I wasn't kidding.
I just tweeted it to you.
Oh, beautiful. Excellent.
All right.
Let's go get a
All right,
beer.
with that,
Let's go drink.
Thank you, guys.
Thank
if
you.
you didn't get a business card, please grab one and see us an email.